Hello apes, this is part 1 of Unit 3B Screencast. Part 2 will also be posted very shortly. Okay, taking a look at North American forests, we have a fair amount of forests in the US, 749 million acres. We have a little bit of taiga, we have Mediterranean climate, we have temperate deciduous. We have a lot of forests in the US. However, almost 70% of that is timberland, meaning that it can be legally logged, and only 7% of it is reserve land, which leaves almost a quarter of it as non-commercial forest types. So they're either privately owned or some sort of protected lands with the state. So our goal when we're talking about forestry is to make forests and forest harvesting sustainable. And sustainable forests are when a forest is managed so that the resource can be harvested at this sustainable rate, okay? And sustainability, remember, we're talking about indefinitely, okay? However, the certification of sustainable forestry is really kind of tricky. So trees don't grow within 5 years. So in order to figure out sustainable forestry, this actually takes a long time. So a series of harvests is usually necessary to prove that you are actually harvesting these forests sustainably. So if you've seen a little tag like this on something, FSC, it's Forest Certified or Sustainable Forest Certified from the Forest Stewardship Council, and all of the wood that is in whatever product it is has been managed to be a sustainable forest. Next we have our beloved rainforests. And rainforests are usually hotspots of biodiversity, huge amounts of biodiversity, huge amounts of biomass. And what we're doing is we are harvesting them at an unsustainable rate because usually these are old growth forests. So in rainforests, you usually have a couple layers. You've got the ground, which doesn't get a lot of sunlight at all. You have then the lower story, the canopy, and the emergent ones. So your emergents are coming out. Your canopy is your basic kind of blanket overarching it, and as you're higher up you get more sunlight, and the lower down you are, the less sunlight you get. So we're going to talk about how a rainforest drains, and I'm going to draw a little picture for you. Okay, I'm going to use some blue. So you have all of these amazing layers, okay, and that's going to be a tree. There we go. And as you guys know, through the process of transpiration, water is actually coming out of the trees, okay? And so what happens, well, there we go, now it looks like a tree. So what happens is you have your lower understory, and they are transpiring, and all of that water is basically evaporating, and it's going up. Now what that water does is it hits the underside of this tree here, and it's deflected and it comes back down. So with all of these layers that you have this transpiration of this water going up, and then it's hitting the other layers of the rainforest, and it's actually deflecting back down. So these water droplets are collecting on the undersides of leaves, and a rainforest, in addition to the insane amount of rain that it gets from atmospheric circulation, has its own mini water cycle inside. And it's because of this transpiration and the deflection down from the other trees. So this is why a forest watershed is so important. So trees evaporate water into the atmosphere, and they also deflect it downward if there are more layers. They prevent erosion. Their roots hold the soil in place. Their roots absorb water in times of flood. And most important, forests provide amazing habitats for wildlife. So when trees are gone, we usually have that positive feedback loop. The trees get chopped down, those roots decay, the soil starts to erode, it goes into a stream because there's nothing to block it there, and then your stream gets murky, and then you get algae that can't photosynthesize, and you get oxygen levels that drop down real low. It's this positive feedback loop. So what you have here is, if you look, this is a riparian zone. So if you have this bare spot up here where there's been some deforestation, that ground, that soil that starts running off, it gets literally caught in this riparian zone, in this forested area or this shrub area, and instead of running off into the stream, it's absorbed into the soil, and it's caught, that soil is caught by the grasses and the trees. So having riparian zones is really awesome, or these buffer zones. Every single stream, lake, river should have a zone around it of green area so that all of that excess runoff can be absorbed instead of running off into the body of water. So we've spoken about ecosystem services, and these ones are specific to forests. Provide wildlife habitat, reduce the soil erosion like we just talked about, especially old growth forests provide massive carbon sinks. It affects the local climate pattern. You cut down trees, you reduce the amount of rain because you don't have that transpiration. It purifies air, it purifies your water, purifying your groundwater. It provides energy and nutrient cycling for that whole process of integrity of the food webs and the food chains. And most importantly, I think it provides us with oxygen. On the same thought process, you have forest products, different than your forest services. These are the resources that come from our forests. So if you look at this graph on the bottom, most of our forests are being harvested for saw logs. And then you have veneer logs, which is that pretty top layer on top of most nice pieces of wood. Then you have pulp, which is for paper, and then your other products. So if you notice, between 1952 and 2001, our harvesting has gone up, and most of our increase has been in paper, as you are looking at your notes that I printed out for you. So removal of timber from both private and national forests in the U.S. has remained steady, but the thing is that our wood consumption has actually increased with our growing human population. So we're getting a lot of our wood from outside of the U.S. now. A lot of that timber comes from places that have a lot of forested areas. Russia, a lot of taiga, those coniferous northern boreal forests. We're going to read an article in class, a precursor to that lumber liquidators getting in trouble article. Brazil has a huge amount of rainforest, and they're doing an incredible job of actually protecting it. Canada, same boat as Russia with the type of forest. USA has a huge amount, and we are doing a good job of not logging, but not so much in other places. China has a lot of forests, but they're cutting it down very rapidly because of industrialization, and so on and so forth. Now on to what your teacher did this summer. Old growth forests. They are climax communities. So these are in succession. You have your end-all be-all. This is your totally and completely high-end ecology here, undisturbed by large-scale natural events like fire or human interference for hundreds and sometimes even thousands of years. Old growth forests are ridiculously ecologically significant because you cut down an old growth forest and it takes thousands of years for these forests to reestablish themselves. They have crazy, unique biodiversity. So here's some pictures of old growth forests. This is how normal people pose with trees. That's Steve. This is in Sequoia National Park, and if you can see over here, a lot of these trees actually have fire damage in them, and they're really resilient and they need that fire. Here's how tree huggers pose with trees. They hug them because trees deserve to be hugged. And what this is this is an incredible root system of a tree. So the tree fell away from where you are, and this is the root system that came up from underneath it. And it's just absolutely massive. This tree right here in the middle is General Sherman. This is the largest living organism in the world, like you guys saw in the video on Friday. And this is probably about missing a third of the top of it. You don't see the top of this tree. So if you zoom in, you can see there look like little things down here. And if you zoom in even more, you can see that these are actually people. So that's a person, and that's a person, and they're standing next to this massive tree. So going back, here, for size reference, are these little people to really show you how absolutely massive this tree is. Almost 2,000 or just over 2,000 years old. These things have been on the earth for a ridiculous amount of time. And here's another fire scar here, and you can see up here as well fire scarring, but the trees live through it. And where you have trees, you have deforestation. So forests have been cutting down probably really since the beginning of time, and the greatest losses in the present century have been in South America in the rainforest. So 4.3 million acres a year are being lost since 2000. And human population growth is the largest cause of cutting down these forests. So the majority of forests are cut for two main reasons: clearing land for agriculture and housing, and then for goods such as lumber, paper, and fuel. The number one reason why the rainforest is cut down is clearing land for agriculture and housing. That's your slash and burn, where people literally cut down the rainforest and they burn it to get nutrients into the soil, because rainforests have crap nutrient soil. 63% of all wood that is produced from these areas is used for firewood, for fuel wood, because people need to boil their water in order to drink it, in order to not get diseases. Indirect deforestation happens with the killing of forests due to pollution or disease, part of HIPCO. Indirect and direct, I mean, we're really harming our forests. So talking about deforestation, there are two main different logging methods. The first one is clear cutting, basically taking all the trees down in an area regardless of what they are. And then there's selective logging. There are a couple different variations of this. You can go in and you can take out single scattered trees, maybe of specific species that you want or a specific height, trees above a specific girth, so basically the size around, or selected groups of trees. So you can take certain clumps of trees from different areas. So in clear cutting, what you get is an area that is totally and completely cleared. So your understory is destroyed. A new forest of economically desirable trees may or may not be planted, but what you see here is basically there's nothing left, and you're left with exposed bare soil, and that's where you run into this positive feedback loop. So here's some of the effects of clear cutting on forest chemical cycles. This is our normal scenario here. So the trees up here, they shade the ground. The decay is slow. The trees take up the nutrients from the soil. The leaves fall, they decompose. The surface runoff, some of it gets into a stream, but usually it's basically filtered through the soil before that can actually happen. And then when we clear cut this ecosystem, they decay very rapidly in these open, warm areas. This soil has a very low amount of albedo, so it's going to heat up pretty rapidly, increasing the decay. The soil is eroded without these tree roots. The runoff is greater because there's no evapotranspiration by your trees, and this is when you end up getting all of these positive feedback loop negative issues. This is really interesting because this is a graph that shows the nitrate concentration in streams following logging and burning of slash. And that's the leaves, branches, and other debris. That's what the slash is. So if you're looking at where the logging actually happens, your nitrate levels are super low. And then what happens is they burn the slash, and then your nitrate rates increase dramatically, and then they tend to drop a bit. So you're having big effects on this nutrient cycle, and nitrates are hugely important for all plants and all ecosystems. So with clear cutting, there are advantages and there are disadvantages. Advantages are, if you are a logger, you have high timber yields, maximum profits. You can regrow with fast-growing trees. It's good for trees that need a lot or moderate sunlight. However, it obviously greatly reduces your biodiversity. It destroys and fragments your wildlife habitat. It increases water pollution, increases flooding, increases erosion on steep slopes and non-steep slopes, and it eliminates most recreational value. So onto strip cutting, which is a variation of clear cutting. Trees are cut down in strips narrow enough for a forest on either side to actually reclaim the land. So after the next 3 to 5 years, the next area is cut. Okay, so then you cut this, and you let it regenerate. So this strip here, this newly cut strip, will not be cut again for another 20 or 30 years. So this is a type of forest management. Then you have selective logging. And what this is you want very specific trees. And they are cut individually, and they're directed to fall in a way that they don't damage the surrounding environment, and then usually they're taken out with helicopters. Commercial plantations are tree farms that are specifically planted for the production of timber and timber-based products. This is a farm for trees, and it's a monoculture. They are choosing trees that are fast-growing. They're producing straight, tall trunks, ideal for logging, ideal for milling. They don't want all of the knots in them. They're not looking for character. They're looking for good, sturdy wood. And Monterey or radiata pine is popular as commercial timber tree. It's fast-growing, produces strong general-purpose timber, and it's ready for logging just 20 years after planting. So there are a lot of commercial plantations that have sustainable pine. Eucalyptus trees are also very fast growing and are also used for commercial plantations. So what this illustrates about a 25-year growing cycle of a commercial forest. So you plant the seedlings, you let them grow, you thin out the weak trees or the trees that have died to create ideal growing conditions. You want to make sure all your trees have the right amount of space, the right amount of sunlight coming in for them. And then after 25 years, you clear cut them, then you plant more seedlings, then they grow, and it's the same thing over and over again. Okay? This is it for now. We're going to start off with forest fires next time.